This is the California DMV that wouldn't let me register my electric motorcycle, but in this video, I'm gonna tell you how I did it anyway. You didn't get my money. This is the Rivid Outset. It's a made in America electric motorcycle. It's totally street legal and it's really awesome. But that's not what this video is about. This video is about this. This is the Oyster M1PS, or as I like to call it, the Chopper. It is an electric motorcycle that looks like some sort of retro chopper type bike. Your feet are way out in front, your hands are up like this when you ride it. It's electric, of course. It's got a hub motor in the back. The battery is right here. Those are important for part of this story. And instead of being made in America like the Rivid I just rolled out of the way, this thing is made in China. Now they say this thing should be street legal as a motorcycle, and it does go over 50 miles an hour. So legally, it can't be an electric bike, it can't be a motorized scooter, it can't be a moped because it goes too fast. The only legal qualification that exists for something like this would be a motorcycle if the California DMV would let me register it as one. And the truth is, they wouldn't. Now I've got a motorcycle plate on the back and there's nothing they can do about it. And I guess as a little bit of sweet justice, California didn't get a dime from. See this thing right on the end here on the license plate holder? That is my temporary license plate. The permanent plate is on the way. This thing is legally registered and road legal in all 50 states. And if you have some sort of Chinese or other electric motorcycle that you'd like to ride on the road, I'm gonna tell you how to do it. So I've shared some of this story, kind of start from the beginning on what sort of problems I ran into in California and some of the problems you may run into in your own state, because some of these are federal regulations and some of these are state specific. Some of these things are just honestly whoever you talk to at your local DMV specific. So when I first brought this thing to the DMV, the paperwork I brought with me was a bill of sale. I brought in an application for title because it was brand new. I brought in a MCO, which is the manufacturer's certificate. And of course, I brought the bike itself so they could take a look at the VIN number. Now the bike has, in my opinion, all of the required things to be road legal. It has a tail light. It has a white light over the license plate. It has brake lights, turn signals, DOT approved tires. It has turn signals up on the front. It has a headlight with both high beam and low beam function. There is a VIN number on the head tube, and there is a federal safety plate or identification plate. I don't remember what it's called, but there is a placard that is riveted to the frame on the head tube as well. So when I first brought this in, the thing they said I was missing, which is California specific, was an emissions label. Now that sounds ridiculous, and it is because it's electric, there are no emissions. They said that was required. I looked at these statutes and the laws, and I get where they're coming from, because on the form they fill out at the DMV, it basically says all motorcycles from such and such year and newer require an emissions label. Does it have it? And there's kind of like a checkbox, yes or no. This bike is newer and it doesn't have it, but common sense says it's electric and that shouldn't be required. So that was step one. So I went home, did some research, tried to contact Oyster and see if it had such a label, and of course they said it doesn't, and why would it need it? Now the Rivid over there actually does have an emissions label, which is how they get around this problem. They just had one applied anyway. After that first visit, I called the local CHP office to see if they had any recommendations. I also called the Sacramento DMV office, and they both agreed that the emissions label shouldn't be required. So I took another trip back to the DMV. This time I brought more paperwork just to try and support my case that it's an electric motorcycle and it should be registered. This person I talked to agreed that it didn't need the emissions label. So we got to the next step, but this time they wanted the engine number. And they were looking right here for an engine number. And of course, it doesn't exist because it doesn't have an engine. Now there is a serial number on the motor itself, which is a hub motor, which really confused them. Like, what do you mean the motor's in the wheel? Both CHP and the DMV were confused about that. But they told me at the DMV, because it doesn't have an engine number, to go to the CHP, have them tell me what the engine number should be. So I went to the CHP with this bike, and they told me, well, you shouldn't have to register it. Even after I told them it goes 50 miles an hour. They said it's just an electric bike, and I had to repeat multiple times how fast it would go and what it was. And finally, I got somebody to come out, but of course, on a whole different day, so I had to make another trip. He took a look at the bike, said, it probably makes sense we just use the motor number as the engine number, but I'm not gonna make that decision today. I will research it and I will get back to you. And get back to me he did with information that made no sense. I have a voicemail on my phone, and he said, you cannot register it. This is not a motorcycle. It is a motor scooter. That is the exact phrase that he used. Now I have, like I said, the MCO. That is the manufacturer certificate of origin for this motorcycle. And I say motorcycle because it says on it vehicle type motorcycle. I had that documentation. I showed that to him. He took pictures of it, but he refused to acknowledge it and called it a motor scooter. Now, by definition, by law, statute, whatever you want to call it, there is no such thing as a motor scooter. And I called him back. Actually, I emailed him a lengthy email and told him, what exactly are you comparing this to? Because a motor scooter does not exist in any California law or vehicle code. There is motorized scooter, but those are limited to 15 miles an hour and have a floorboard and either stand up or sit down. Obviously, that is not what this is. We have electric bicycles, we have mopeds, we have all these other categories, and motor scooter does not exist. So I went back to the DMV a third time just to have them really dig through the regulations and say, listen, this thing can only be classified as a motorcycle. If you're not going to register it, you need to tell me why. And on that third and final trip to the California DMV, I was unsuccessful. They refused to let me register it, and I asked very specific questions about why can I not register it, and they refused to answer. They got on the phone with the CHP officer as well, and what he said, and he told me this personally, was that, well, it doesn't meet the federal safety standards. Now, I'm not arguing with the fact that it may not. In fact, I can point out a couple of reasons why it probably doesn't. But he would not state what they were because he honestly didn't know. He said it needs to have the federal plaque, and I said, it does, you saw it. And he said, well, it's China and they can put whatever they want on there. So basically he accused Iahora of just making things up to skirt around the laws, but he couldn't tell me what those laws actually were. I had to decide, what do I do with this thing? Because I want to ride it on the road. I have CHP officers telling me that I don't need to register it, then telling me I should register it, then telling me I can't register it. Iahora says I should be able to, and other people in California have at different DMV offices where they let it through. So when Iahora sent this thing to me originally, they said it was street legal or that you could register it. So I wanted to register it just to show that, hey, here was a legal electric motorcycle under $5,000. So I decided to just go around California completely and get it registered elsewhere, but legally. This is not a way to skirt around the laws. This is a totally legal, I'll still call it a loophole because I would say it kind of is. And this is something you can do for basically any electric motorcycle that previously was not deemed street legal by California. So it doesn't matter where you live, whether you're in California or not, this is something you can do. And in theory, you should be able to register Surrons, Talarias, anything that maybe looks like an electric dirt bike, anything imported from China that does not have the emissions labels, none of that is going to matter. So how did I do it? Well, the state regulations are very different from place to place, and in Montana, they are quite relaxed. There is no in-person inspection, so nobody's gonna actually look at the motorcycle. And their definition of motorcycle is a bit more broad. It just has to meet a speed requirement. It needs to have turn signals front and rear, a headlight with high beam and low beam, a white light over the license plate holder, brake lights, and that's primarily it. So if you live in the state of Montana, it would be very easy to register one of these. Now, I don't live in the state of Montana. I live in California, which means I have to register vehicles that I own in the state of California. If I took this motorcycle all the way to Montana, registered there, and then brought it all the way back home and rode it around and got pulled over, they would say, hey, you have 30 days or 60 days or whatever the law says, you have to transfer this to California. And then they may or may not let me actually do that because they may not agree that this is actually an electric motorcycle. So that's not really a viable option. But what if I personally don't own it? That is the great loophole. What if someone in Montana owns this motorcycle? Or not a person, an entity. Well, then this can be registered to the owner and the owner's address. So I reached out to Dirt Legal, and they specialize in registering vehicles of all types, not just motorcycles, but cars, motorhomes, trailers, and doing it the proper legal way. First, by forming an LLC for you in the state of Montana, and then registering your vehicle to that LLC. So right now, there is an LLC in Montana called E-Legal. Its registered address is in Montana. And what does that company own? Right now, a single electric motorcycle, the Eahora Chopper. And it's not just a way to register things that might otherwise be difficult to register. It can also save you a lot of money. California wanted to charge me well over $500 to register this. And then I would have renewal fees every single year. The plate that I have coming for this is a permanent Montana plate, meaning I pay registration one time and never again. And also, Montana does not charge sales tax. Now I'm seeing on YouTube, in the news, on Facebook groups that people are getting Surrons. I even saw a Stark Varg the other day getting impounded. And often it's in bigger cities in the LA area where this is happening, but people are taking electric dirt bikes effectively and riding them on the street illegally. So if you are one of those people and you want to continue riding your electric motorcycle that was intended for off-road use on the road, but do it without fear of being pulled over and your bike impounded, this is the solution for you. Now, to my surprise, the process was really fast. I emailed in my information, I filled out some forms, they sent me a prepaid FedEx label to mail my paperwork in. There was one thing I had to have notarized, and then once I mailed everything in to Dirt Legal, they took care of the process from there. They talked to the DMV, they do all the paperwork correctly, and within a few days, I had in my email a temporary plate, so my bike is legal to ride. And in a few more weeks, I will have my permanent Montana plate mounted to the back of this thing. So I'm so glad I found this as an option. Over the years, there's been many electric motorcycles that maybe don't have all the requirements that California wants, and I wish I could ride them on the street. now I have an option. Now, if you have specific questions about something you have and whether or not it's possible, I would definitely recommend checking out Dirt Legal. I will put a link in the description. So I know that is a long answer to the question of whether or not I got this particular bike registered, but I did, and the odds are if you have some strange electric bike you want to get registered, you can too.